The desert winds howled like whispers from a dying world. Sand curled into the sky in slow spirals, as if the planet itself sighed in pain. She stumbled again. Her knees hit the searing ground, and the blue pigment of her skin shimmered faintly under the sun's merciless glare. She was alone. No, not entirely. There, slung over her shoulder in a makeshift sling of frayed fabric, was the small bundle of life she'd risked everything for, her daughter, barely a cycle old, wrapped tightly against her back. The child stirred, a dry cough escaping her tiny mouth. There was no more water. The alien, her name was Teowin, gazed across the dunes. The world of Taraxis had been cruel to her kind. Once lush, once filled with rivers that shimmered like molten glass, the planet had suffered a collapse. Greed, war, and atmospheric tampering had stripped it of clouds, of oceans, of mercy. Teowin's people were scattered now, dust on the wind. And she was the last known survivor in this sector. She clutched a sensor crystal in her hand. One blinking blue dot. Not much to go on, but hope wasn't about certainty. It was about motion. Movement meant survival. And so, barefoot and blistered, she crawled forward. Then, out of the silence, came the sound of propulsion. Not the high-pitched scream of Tarasian skimmers, this was heavier, deeper. She turned her head sharply. Over a dune, a strange figure emerged. A bipedal creature, clothed in sun-worn armor, dark lenses shielding his eyes. A Terran. She froze. Her people spoke of Terrans with caution. They were resourceful, adaptable, and terrifyingly unpredictable. Some brought aid. Others brought fire. Still, she didn't move. Not until the human stopped, knelt down, and without a word unclasped the jug strapped to his pack. Water. The shine of it caught her like lightning. She didn't believe it was real at first. Not until he poured it, slowly, into a shallow dent in the sand. Not until she could smell it. Real, clean, drinkable water. Teowin's pride fractured like dry clay. She crawled, face streaked with grit and tears, to the tiny pool. She didn't plunge in greedily. No, she cupped her hands, trembling, and brought it to her daughter first. The child whimpered, latched onto the moisture instinctively. Then, and only then, did Teowin take her first sip. The human sat down across from her, not speaking. Just watching, as if unsure what to say. She looked up at him. His face was unreadable, but not hostile. She spoke, voice dry and cracked. Why? He pulled a translator node from his belt and clipped it to his collar. A second later, it crackled and buzzed, then his voice came through in her tongue. Because I can. Simple words. Powerful ones. They sat in silence, and the wind softened as if it, too, paused to listen. She learned his name, Jace. He was a Recon scout, dropped into the quadrant to chart surviving settlements and failed colonies. His mission was to map. Not to interfere. And yet, here he was. The next day, Jace built a canopy from parts of his broken glider. Gave them shade. Rationed his water tablets, shared nutrient bars with her and the child. When Teowin offered him a solar crystal, a priceless relic among her people, he refused it. I'm not helping for a trade, he said. I'm helping because you and that kid are still breathing. And that means there's still something left worth fighting for. She stared at him long and hard. No Tarasian ever spoke that way. They traded, bargained, calculated every act of charity like an investment. But this human. He gave like a spring that didn't know how to stop flowing. But water ran out. And by the 5th day, even the emergency tablets were nearly gone. They had to move. Jace rigged a gravity sled from his equipment and placed Teowin and her child on it. He pulled them across the dunes, step after painful step. The sun blistered his skin, turned his lips to cracked parchment. She begged him to stop, to rest. He refused. And then, one night, the sky lit up. A storm. Real clouds. Thunder. Not sand, but moisture. Taraxis hadn't seen rain in decades. Teowin stood in awe, holding her daughter to her chest as water fell from the sky like a forgotten gift. Jace looked up, eyes closed, face tilted to the heavens. The rain soaked through his clothes, chilled his burning skin, washed away blood and grit. She stepped toward him. You did this. He laughed, hoarse and shaking his head. Not me. But maybe the universe pays attention to stubborn people. The next morning, they arrived at a dormant station buried in sand. Jace's signal repeater pinged alive. A Terran outpost abandoned, but intact. With filtration systems, solar cells, and food stores. It was salvation. But more than that, it was a chance. That night, as her child finally slept without crying, Tywin sat beside the fire Jace had built. She leaned close and whispered, "If my people knew you, if they knew what you did." Jace smiled. "Maybe one day they will. For now, let's just get through tomorrow." She looked at him. Tomorrow didn't feel so impossible anymore. The wind had changed. It was subtle at first, less harsh, more humid. Tywin noticed it before Jace did. Her Tarasian senses, dulled by exhaustion but sharpened by instinct, picked up the faintest shift in the air. There was life nearby. Not just in her daughter's steady breaths or the oasis they'd stumbled into, but something else. Movement. Activity. The kind that didn't belong to the desert. Jace looked up from the repeater, eyes narrowing. "You feel that?" She nodded. "We're not alone." They didn't have to wait long. The next morning, as the twin suns began to rise, a shadow passed across the sand. Not a cloud. Something mechanical. Angular. It shimmered with cloaking tech for only a second before solidifying into full view, a hovercraft, marked in symbols Tywin hadn't seen since before the collapse. She grabbed her daughter instinctively. Jace stood, calm but alert. From the hatch, 3 figures stepped out. 2 wore scavenger gear, thick armor patched together from mismatched tech. The third wore ceremonial robes. Tarasian. Not just any caste, royal. Tryn gasped. "House Vireth." The robed figure removed her hood, revealing the face of someone Tywin once knew. Sarian, heir to the Vireth line, thought dead years ago. "Tryn?" Sarian's voice wavered. "By the stars. I thought no one survived the Western Drift. I shouldn't have. But someone helped me." She motioned toward Jace. "A human." Sarian looked him over carefully. "I've heard of Terrans. Fierce. Dangerous. Opportunistic. Or generous," Tywin countered. "He saved our lives." Jace gave a small shrug. "Wasn't a big deal." "It was," Tywin said quietly. Sarian turned to her companions. "Prepare the quarters. They come with us." The hovercraft hummed back to life, and for the first time in weeks, Tywin wasn't breathing sand. Inside, the air was filtered, cool, and sharp with the scent of chemical stabilizers. Her daughter clung to her as they passed through sterilization fields and nutrient scans. Sarian debriefed her as the vehicle moved. "We've reclaimed a fraction of the old capital. Underground bunkers survived. Hydroprocessors too. But it's not enough. We need tech. Power. And people. And you think I can help?" Tywin asked. "You're the last known bloodline from the Surface Council. Your voice has weight." Tywin glanced at Jace. "Then I speak only with him at my side." Sarian hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed. But he'll be watched." Jace smirked. Nothing new. They arrived at dusk. Hidden beneath the sand, the city of Kareth still lived, barely. A population of a few hundred, surviving off algae tanks and rationed air. Children played silently in narrow corridors. Elderly Taraxians sat around light cores like they were sacred. Jace noticed it all. He didn't speak much. He didn't have to. That night, council members gathered. Some welcomed Tywin. Others eyed Jace with suspicion. "He's an outsider," one spat. "We should confiscate his gear and send him back." Tywin stepped forward. "Without him, I would be dead. So would my daughter." The room quieted. Jace finally spoke. "I'm not here to lead your people. Or interfere. But I found something on my way here. Something buried in the sand 2 clicks from your perimeter. A satellite relay. Intact." Whispers filled the chamber. A working satellite relay meant connection. Communication. Access to other colonies. Trade. Hope. He pulled up the map on his wrist pad. I left a beacon on it. It's real. But it's deep in Black Dune territory. Black Dunes. A cursed zone, riddled with collapsed caverns, scavenger traps, and violent heat storms. No one had returned from there in over a decade. Tryn stood. Then we'll go together. The decision was made. At dawn, they would leave. In the darkness of their borrowed quarters, Tryn sat across from Jace as her daughter slept. Why did you tell them? He looked at her. Because you and your people still have a chance. And I can't sit back and watch it waste away. Not if I can do something. She reached for his hand. Hesitated. Then pulled back. He noticed, but didn't speak. Instead, he said, tomorrow's going to be hard. Tryn nodded. Yes. But for the first time. I think we might win. Neither of them slept that night. The sun had not yet risen when they left. 3 figures moved like shadows across the sand, Tryn, Jace, and a young Tarasian guard named Enel, handpicked by Sarian. He was skeptical of Jace, respectful toward Tryn, and silently terrified of the Black Dunes. Why do they call it cursed? Jace asked as they scaled a ridge. Enel hesitated. Because every expedition that entered never came back. Jace adjusted his pack. So, morale's high. Tryn cracked a smile, but it didn't last. The dunes were quiet, too quiet. Even the wind, usually constant, had stilled as if the desert were holding its breath. Hours passed. The sun burned overhead. Jace's scanners picked up irregular energy signatures, signs of buried tech and failed drones. But no life. Not until they reached the ridge that overlooked a dry valley, once a riverbed, now a graveyard of twisted metal. There, Jace pointed. That spike signal booster must have broken off from the satellite relay. The rest has to be buried nearby. Enel descended first. Cautious. Rifle drawn. Tryn followed, keeping her eyes on the shattered horizon. Then the sand shifted. It started as a rumble. Then a jolt. The ground gave way under Jace's boots. Tryn. He dropped. She screamed, diving after him, catching his wrist just in time. The sand poured beneath him like water. His pack dragged him down. Enel lunged, grabbing Tryn's arm, anchoring them both. For a moment, it was chaos. Then the ground settled. They pulled Jace out, coughing and shaking. Thanks, he wheezed. Remind me not to take scenic routes. But what he'd fallen into wasn't just a sinkhole. It was a chamber. A buried facility, old Tarasian tech, half intact, half swallowed by time. Jace climbed down again, this time with a harness. Inside was silence and dust. Until he found it. The relay. Still connected to a power source. Ancient, but functional. He brushed sand off the control panel. Lights blinked. A low hum filled the chamber. He tapped a few commands into his wrist pad. Signals pinged. Got it, he whispered. We're back online. Tryn's voice crackled through his comm. Can you send a message? He nodded. Not just one. I can scan for colonies, settlements, any civilization still broadcasting. Then he froze. Because someone was already broadcasting. A signal, faint, looping, encrypted. Not Tarasian. Not Terran. Something else. Jace stared at it. We've got company. He uplinked to Caratha's systems. Fed the data to Sarian. She replied immediately. Unknown frequency. Proceed with extreme caution. They returned to the surface, gear intact, but tension growing. That night, they camped near a rock outcrop. The relay, now portable, sat wrapped in shielding foil. Jace rigged a motion perimeter. Enel took first watch. Tryn sat beside Jace as stars blinked overhead. You think they're watching us? Someone is, he said. That signal wasn't local. And it wasn't friendly. What if it's scavengers? Jace shook his head. Too clean. Too steady. Scavenger tech sloppy. This was surgical. They slept lightly. Just before dawn, Enel shouted. Movement. Shapes darted across the ridge. Fast. Silent. Not human. Not Tarasian. Jace leapt up, rifle in hand. "Get behind me." But the attack never came. Instead, a small object was thrown from the ridge. It bounced once. Then beeped. Jace dove, covering Tryn and Enel. A pulse wave erupted. Not lethal, but powerful enough to shut down their gear. The relay flickered. Lights died. His wrist pad crackled, then blacked out. "EMP," he growled. "They don't want us dead. Just blind." Then the message came. A voice, alien, mechanical, but eerily calm, came through a backup speaker. "Do not activate the relay. Do not contact off-world systems. You are being monitored. Return to your settlement. This is your only warning." Tywin's face turned to stone. "They want us to stay silent. Stay buried." Jace stood. "Then we just confirmed something big. There's more going on here than survival." Enel looked terrified. "We can't fight them." "No," Jace said. "But we can outthink them." He got to work. Spent the rest of the day gutting the relay's backup systems, isolating the signal paths, building a dummy transmission. By nightfall, the real relay was buried again, hidden. But the false signal? That one they left exposed. "Let them think we gave up," Jace said. "While we move the real message underground." Tywin stared at him. "You plan all this in one day?" "Stubborn people," he said with a smirk. "The universe listens, remember?" The next morning, they marched back toward Kareth, with evidence, with warning, and with the one working signal that could change everything. Jace looked up at the sky, narrowing his eyes. Whatever was out there, it had just blinked first. The gate to Kareth hissed open as the three returned, battered but alive. News traveled faster than they did. By the time they reached the inner chambers, the entire council was waiting. Tywin walked first, her chin held high. Enel followed, bruised and wide-eyed. Jace brought up the rear, carrying the relay core wrapped in layers of shielding. He laid it on the council table like an offering. "They didn't want us to find this," he said. "They don't want you to know you're not alone." The council buzzed with cautious optimism. Sarian stood, looking at Tryn. "Did they attack?" "No," she replied. "They warned. They fear exposure." That changed everything. Over the next few days, Jace led the rebuilding of the relay system, this time in secrecy, deep within the mountain tunnels beneath Kareth. The old energy cores were recharged, filtration tech restored, and the algae fields optimized with human engineering. Tarazian and Terran, side by side. Tywin, once a forgotten refugee of a broken land, now stood as a voice for her people. She used that voice not to demand war, but to prepare for peace. A guarded peace. One that knew silence wasn't safety, it was suffocation. And so they broadcasted. A simple message, sent across fringe systems. ***, we live. We remember. We are rebuilding. If you hear this, you are not alone. ***. The signal spread. Days passed. Then, responses began trickling in weak, fragmented pings from nearby star systems. Broken colonies. Hidden ships. Abandoned outposts where lights flickered back on. Hope traveled faster than fear. One evening, as the sky over Kareth turned violet with dusk, Jace stood at the edge of a newly growing field, a patch of living green fed by reclaimed water. Tywin stood beside him, her daughter asleep in a sling over her chest. She looked at him for a long moment. "You could leave now. Your duty's done." Jace didn't answer at first. He bent down, picked up a handful of fresh soil. Held it in his hand like it was treasure. "I think I already left," he said finally. "The day I gave you that water." She smiled quietly. "You stayed because of her?" she asked, nodding to her daughter. He looked up. "I stayed because I saw what kind of future was still possible. And it has your name all over it." Later that week, Sarian announced the formation of a new alliance, small at first, but built on truth, resilience, and the lesson that silence never protects what's worth saving. And when another alien voice returned their message, not in threat, but in curiosity, Kareth became a hub. A crossroads for survivors. The desert had once been their grave. Now it was a beginning. Tywin built schools underground. Jace taught water systems and defense. Enel trained others, inspired by courage he'd once thought impossible. And every time a visitor came, weary from the stars and desperate for something real, they were greeted with a basin of water and the same words etched in silver on the gate. Asterisk asterisk because we can. Asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk moral asterisk asterisk. Asterisk true survival is not just enduring the worst, but choosing to help others do the same. Even when no one asks. Especially then. Asterisk.